9/11, a tragic day in which we all remember. And because of this day, it has established terrible relations between the U.S. and Middle Eastern countries. And because of this, I, Kennedy Johnson, ask you the question, to what extent does America's misinterpretations of Islamic culture after 9/11 negatively impact Muslims' views on America, their work experiences, and their marriages? In the early 2000s, there were 20 court cases and 11,000 reports of discrimination. Additionally, in 2011, 37% of Muslims reported discrimination that they had faced in American society on a daily basis. Lastly, in 2016, Donald Trump made a temporary Muslim ban due to the fact that he viewed them as terrorists. Others believe that discrimination does not take a toll on Muslims' lives. However, many others believe that America's perceptions and negative views towards Muslims lead to Muslims viewing America in a negative way and having work bias experiences and conflicts within their marriages. First and foremost, Muslims' views on America. Carl Kuhn, a former U.S. ambassador, discusses America's approach to fight terrorism after 9/11. He discusses that the George Bush Association banned Muslims from entering America in the early 2000s, thus not only restricting Muslims' living spaces and opportunities, but causing them to feel like targets and feel angry towards Americans. Becky Coma, a doctor of social psychology, discusses the mental health effects of distress that Muslims are dealt with due to discrimination that they face. According to Becky Coma, after 9/11, stress from Muslims increased by 90%, as shown in this picture to the left. Coupled with America's views on America is job bias that Muslims face. Eva Malachi, a vice president at operations at Naphtali Group, discusses unfair bias that Muslims face in their workplace. It has been proven that many Muslims have difficult times finding jobs in comparison to American employees, thus not only giving them unfair job opportunities, but causing them to not have a stable foundation to live in American society. Robert Lee, a professor of political science, discusses religious bias inside the workplace in regards to not allowing Muslims to pray in their workplace and wear certain religious clothing. This leaves Muslims with an ultimatum between their job and their culture, leaving many of them financially unstable. As shown in this graph, in 1997, there were 1,309 cases of discrimination. But in 2010, it went up tremendously to 3,390. Lastly, Muslim-American interracial marriages. Manager Danishpour, a professor of couple and family therapy, discusses social conflicts that many Muslim-American interracial families face. It has been proven that many of them lose friends due to ideological differences that they have with their spouse. That causes many of them to not able to socialize with many Americans in society. Lastly, Zarina Agriwal, a researcher of religion, race, gender, and nationalism, discusses social conflicts that these family members have, that these marriages have with their family members. Many American parents do not approve of these marriages because they do not want them to forget their identity, and they do not approve of the Muslim culture. This causes many conflicts inside the marriage because they tend to blame each other for their loss of the bond with their family members. On the other hand, Manager Danishpour again discusses that even though they face many struggles, many of them are not deeply affected since they find many people in the Muslim community that have dealt with this discrimination for years and have gone through hate from families and friends. And many of them meet friends like this, as shown in this picture to the left. This is a valid point because since they are going to have many experiences with people that understand their struggles, it still affects them majorly because they feel hurt that many of their family members and friends do not approve of their marriage. Overall, Muslims face a lot of discrimination, but the best way to help reduce this problem is to have support groups for Muslims. This may consist of giving them just support or medicine and money to better their mental health and allow them to live in American society. Lastly, Americans who participate in this heinous crime must be punished, as shown to the picture to the right. There are many implications and limitations to this solution. First off, if Americans are punished for their crime, there would be less violence within American society, since they will be locked away and not face to face with Muslims. Additionally, there would be better relations between the U.S. and Middle Eastern countries, since it would be more welcoming, and Muslims would be able to express their culture more openly. Lastly, Muslims will be financially stable, since they will be provided with resources in these therapies. Now to limitations. Even though this could be applied to the real world, there's still going to be a lot of hate and negative feelings towards Muslims, since this is how many Muslims were taught to view them in their upbringing. Additionally, there's still going to be hate between U.S. and Middle Eastern countries. And lastly, if more Americans are punished, that means the economy would worsen, since there will be less people working and more people in jail. So open your eyes and your hearts, and don't judge people for their religion, but how they are.
Kennedy, how valid and reliable are the sources you used? How do you know?
The sources that I used were very reliable and credible. For example, some of them that I used were such as Zarina A. Grewal. She was a researcher of Muslims and the struggles that they deal with. And another one, which was Eva Malachi. She works at the Naphtali Group, which is a business and workplace that cooperates with many Muslims and has many Muslim employees. Therefore, they have knowledge on them. And lastly, Robert Lee was a researcher on the Islamic culture, and he has even traveled there, so he knows the certain customs that they have.
And which sources didn't work?
Some of the sources that didn't work were, a lot of the sources that I found just talked about discrimination in a broad way and Islamophobia, and it talked about the struggles that Muslims face, but it did not talk about the effects on them, therefore contradicting my argument, so I excluded them.
And what additional questions emerged from your research, and why are those questions important?
Additional questions that came from my research were, why did Americans turn to blame Muslims for 9/11, and why are they not giving this much hate to other minority and religious groups? And this is important because if they are continuing to show these terrible relations with Middle Eastern countries, it can affect long term how the Middle East views America, and it can even cause them to retaliate on America.